On April 15, 2026, inside a room controlled almost entirely by generals from Iran's Revolutionary Guard, a vote took place that would decide who actually controls one of the most powerful, most secretive governments on the entire planet. And the man who walked out of that room as Iran's new supreme leader wasn't chosen because he was the most qualified religious scholar in the country. He was chosen because the Revolutionary Guard wanted him there. And in the process, an entire generation of Iran's most senior officials, some killed by enemy airstrikes, some simply squeezed out of relevance, discovered exactly how brutal the fight for power inside a country at war can actually become. Let me walk you through exactly how this succession battle unfolded, because when you understand who actually won, who actually lost, and who simply vanished from public life entirely during this process, you'll understand exactly why Iran's own internal power structure looks completely different today than it did before this war ever started. Here's how this entire crisis began. On February 28, 2026, in the opening strikes of the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran, Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran as supreme leader for 36 years, was killed. And in the exact same wave of strikes that killed him, Iran lost an almost unbelievable number of its most senior military leaders in a single day. Mohammad Pakpour, the commander of the entire Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was killed in an airstrike in Tehran that very same day, February 28th. Think about what that actually means. In one single day, Iran lost both its supreme leader and the commander of its most powerful military and security organization simultaneously, an almost unimaginable decapitation of the entire top of Iran's power structure all at once. According to detailed reporting from the Irish Times, based on interviews with senior officials, clerics, and guard members themselves, the moment Khamenei was killed, rival political factions and Revolutionary Guard generals immediately began scheming to elevate their own preferred candidates and secure their own individual power bases. This wasn't some calm, orderly, traditional succession process playing out according to established religious protocol. This was a genuine scramble for power, unfolding in real time, in the middle of an active war, with different factions pulling in completely different directions about what Iran's future should even look like. Two clearly defined camps emerged almost immediately. The Hardliners wanted defiance, both against the United States and Israel externally, and against any internal calls for regime change domestically. They wanted continuity, a doubling down on exactly the same policies the country had followed under Ali Khamenei for over 3 decades. On the other side, a more moderate faction argued for something completely different, a new face entirely, a genuinely new style of governance, and critically, an actual end to hostilities with the United States rather than continued confrontation. This wasn't a minor disagreement over policy details. This was a fundamental fork in the road for the entire future direction of the Islamic Republic, playing out at the exact moment the country's leadership had just been decapitated by enemy strikes. Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the assassinated supreme leader, emerged as the hardliner camp's chosen candidate, and, according to detailed reporting, he had genuinely powerful allies backing his rise. The Revolutionary Guard itself, and its newly appointed commander-in-chief, General Ahmad Vahidi, who had just stepped into that role following Pakpour's death. General Muhammad Ali Aziz Jafari, a senior guard strategist actively involved in running the current war, and General Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the Speaker of Iran's parliament and himself a former commander of the Guard. Notice something important about that entire list of backers. Every single one of them came from inside the Revolutionary Guard's own orbit, either currently serving or having previously served within that exact organization. This wasn't a broad, diverse coalition representing different corners of Iranian society and government. This was the Guard specifically consolidating support behind one of their own preferred candidates. On the opposing side, the moderate faction found its voice through former Iranian presidents Mohammad Khatami and Hassan Rouhani, both long-standing advocates for structural reform in Iran's domestic and foreign policy. According to detailed reporting from Foreign Affairs, these reformists and moderates viewed Mojtaba specifically as the embodiment of continued hardline policy, someone they considered fundamentally incapable of forging any genuine national consensus, and someone with no real appetite for the kind of meaningful change many Iranians had been quietly hoping for after decades of isolation and economic hardship. So how did the hardliners actually win this fight, when the outcome genuinely wasn't a foregone conclusion at the outset? The answer comes down almost entirely to raw institutional access and control in the exact chaotic moment when this decision needed to be made. According to Foreign Affairs' detailed reporting, in the chaotic aftermath of Khamenei's assassination, the hardliners, and particularly the IRGC specifically, had what the reporting describes as unparalleled access to the Assembly of Experts, the specific clerical body constitutionally responsible for actually selecting Iran's new supreme leader. And here's the detail that genuinely explains everything about how this entire process actually played out. Many members of that assembly personally rely on the Revolutionary Guard for their own physical protection and security. Think about what that actually means for the independence of a supposedly free deliberative vote. When the body responsible for choosing your country's next leader depends on one specific faction for its own personal safety, in the middle of an active war, with enemy strikes still potentially targeting senior officials, how much genuine independent deliberation do you actually expect to happen in that room? The vote itself, held on March 3rd, 2026, just days after the war began, confirmed exactly this dynamic in action. Mojtaba Khamenei obtained the necessary 2/3 majority required to be confirmed, a result that reporting at the time explicitly signaled the Guard generals had successfully gained the influence needed to install their preferred candidate at the very top of Iran's entire power structure. But here's where this story becomes genuinely fascinating. And honestly, a little bit strange, because winning that vote didn't actually translate into Mojtaba Khamenei genuinely running the country the way his father once did. According to detailed reporting from Reuters, published toward the end of April 2026, roughly 2 months into the war, Iran was operating without a single undisputed clerical authority at its apex for the first time since the Islamic Republic's founding back in 1979, a genuinely profound rupture in the entire structure of power that had defined the country for nearly 5 decades. 3 separate individuals, familiar with internal deliberations, told Reuters that Mojtaba's actual functional role had become largely to endorse decisions that had already been shaped by military and security elites, rather than to genuinely set direction himself. Read that description again carefully, because it tells you everything about the real nature of power inside Iran right now. Mojtaba Khamenei holds the title, he won the vote. He sits, at least formally, at the very top of the entire system. But according to people with direct, first-hand knowledge of how decisions are actually being made, his real function has become closer to that of a figure of assent, someone who signs off on choices that senior IRGC commanders and security officials have already made among themselves, rather than someone who's actually steering the ship. Part of the explanation for this arrangement comes down to something we've discussed before, but it's worth reinforcing here given everything else we now know about how this succession actually played out. Mojtaba Khamenei was reportedly severely injured in the opening strikes of this war, the exact same wave of attacks that killed his father, and he has still not appeared publicly since being confirmed as supreme leader. According to 2 people close to his own inner circle, he communicates instead through IRGC intermediaries, or through restricted controlled audio channels, rather than delivering anything resembling a direct, live, unfiltered public address. Now think carefully about the actual power dynamic hiding underneath that arrangement. When your only communication with the outside world runs exclusively through Revolutionary Guard intermediaries, and your role has become, in the words of people with direct knowledge, largely about endorsing decisions rather than making them, how much genuine independent authority do you actually retain? Reuters reporting confirmed exactly what this structural shift actually looks like in practice, describing how the traditional model of Iranian clerical supremacy has effectively been replaced, at least functionally, by a decentralized but tightly controlled wartime structure centered specifically on the Supreme National Security Council, the Supreme Leader's own office apparatus, and senior IRGC commanders working together. This is exactly where the succession war our title refers to actually becomes visible, not through some single, dramatic, cinematic moment of one man openly seizing power from another, but through this much quieter, much more structural process of the Revolutionary Guard steadily absorbing and consolidating real decision-making authority, while leaving Mojtaba Khamenei holding the formal title, the religious legitimacy that comes with the Khamenei family name, and increasingly little of the actual practical power that title has historically carried in Iran. There's a specific, genuinely important detail buried in this broader story that connects directly to the vanished rivals part of everything we're discussing here. Ali Larijani, who had been serving as Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, one of the single most important security and strategic decision-making bodies in the entire country, was killed during this exact period. And here's the detail that tells you everything about which faction actually benefited from that loss. Following Larijani's killing, a former IRGC commander named Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar was appointed to head that exact same council in his place. According to detailed analysis from the Gulf International Forum, that specific appointment strongly suggests the broader post-succession reshuffle across Iran's top security institutions has consistently reinforced one clear, unmistakable pattern: the Revolutionary Guard steadily tightening its grip over every single lever of power across the entire government, one appointment at a time, one vacant position at a time, filling nearly every single gap left behind by the war's staggering death toll among senior officials with its own loyal personnel. And that death toll among Iran's senior leadership genuinely deserves its own moment of reflection here, because it helps explain exactly why so many positions across Iran's government and security apparatus needed to be refilled at all during this exact period. Majid Kademi, who served as director of the IRGC's intelligence organization, was killed in an assassination by airstrike on April 6, 2026, just weeks after Mojtaba's confirmation as supreme leader. His own predecessor, in that exact same role, Mohammad Kazemi, had himself already been killed by an earlier airstrike back on June 15, 2025, months before this current war even began, meaning Iran's intelligence organization lost 2 consecutive directors to targeted assassination within less than a year of each other. Ali Shamkhani, who had served in multiple senior roles including Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council and a member of the Expediency Discernment Council, was also killed as part of this same broader campaign on February 28th, the very same devastating opening day of the war. Think about the sheer scale of leadership turnover this specific stretch of time actually represents inside Iran's government. A supreme leader killed. The commander of the entire Revolutionary Guard killed on that same exact day. An intelligence director killed, followed by his successor also being killed just months later. A National Security Council secretary killed, replaced by his former IRGC commander specifically. This isn't simply a succession story about one single leadership transition happening at the very top of the government. This is a story about an entire layer of senior Iranian officials being systematically eliminated, or otherwise effectively sidelined, within the span of just a few months, creating a genuinely unprecedented vacuum of experienced established leadership across nearly every critical institution the country actually depends on to function. And into that vacuum, according to every single piece of detailed reporting we've walked through together, one single institution has consistently stepped forward to fill the gap, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps itself. The Gulf International Forum's analysis captures this dynamic about as clearly as any single piece of reporting on this entire crisis. The IRGC, this analysis explains, have long been far more than simply a military institution. They function simultaneously as political actors, as an intelligence network in their own right, as a genuine economic force controlling vast portions of Iran's actual economy, and as a core pillar of overall regime preservation. After Ali Khamenei's death specifically, the analysis continues. The IRGC tightened its grip over wartime decision-making even further, taking the clear lead on all major strategic decisions, while simultaneously reinforcing its own role in internal security and domestic repression as well. That same analysis includes a line that genuinely captures the full weight of everything we've discussed throughout this entire story. Mojtaba Khamenei's appointment as Iran's new supreme leader, the analysis argues, signals not a routine, orderly succession, but a much deeper, more fundamental shift toward outright IRGC dominance and governance increasingly built on coercion rather than genuine religious or popular legitimacy. A separate expert quoted in that same analysis went even further, arguing that Ali Khamenei's death hasn't actually launched any genuine political transition inside Iran at all. Instead, it has simply accelerated a much deeper reconfiguration of the entire Islamic Republic, one where traditional clerical legitimacy, the exact foundation the entire post-1979 system was originally built on, now carries dramatically less real weight than it once did, while the Revolutionary Guard has firmly emerged as the actual functional arbiter of power across the entire country. So when you step back and look at the complete picture painted by everything we've walked through together, you start to understand exactly why this entire situation genuinely deserves to be called a succession war, even though it never involved the kind of dramatic, open, public power struggle you might picture from that phrase. This was a war fought through a devastating series of assassinations that eliminated an entire generation of Iran's senior military and intelligence leadership within just a few short months. It was fought through a chaotic, closed-door vote inside an assembly of experts, whose own members depended on one specific faction for their personal physical safety in the exact moment they were supposed to be independently choosing the country's next leader. And it's continuing to be fought, quietly, methodically, appointment by appointment, as the Revolutionary Guard steadily fills every single vacancy left behind by this staggering wave of deaths with its own loyal personnel, while the man formerly holding the title of Supreme Leader remains unseen, unheard directly by his own public, and functioning, according to people with direct knowledge of these internal deliberations, largely as a figure who endorses decisions rather than one who actually makes them. That's the real story hiding behind the succession of Mojtaba Khamenei, a story that goes well beyond simply asking who inherited his father's title. It's a story about an entire institution, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, using the chaos, the devastating leadership losses, and the sheer institutional access it already possessed in the exact moment of crisis to fundamentally reshape who actually holds real power inside Iran, regardless of whose name technically sits at the very top of the organizational chart. And for every single senior Iranian official who was killed, sidelined, or simply squeezed out of relevance during this exact window of chaos, the lesson has become impossible to ignore. In Iran right now, formal titles matter significantly less than who actually controls the guns, the intelligence networks, and the institutional access needed to make the decisions that genuinely matter. And right now, all three of those things point directly toward one single organization holding the real power behind Iran's throne. If this breakdown of exactly how this entire succession battle actually played out behind the scenes genuinely surprised you, drop a comment below and let me know which specific part of this story caught you most off guard. Because honestly, when you actually lay out just how many senior officials were killed within such a short window of time, it becomes a lot easier to understand exactly why the Revolutionary Guard ended up filling almost every single gap left behind. And if you made it all the way through this one with me, share it with someone who still thinks Mojtaba Khamenei is genuinely running Iran the same way his father once did. Because as this story shows, the real power inside Iran right now sits with a very different group of people entirely. We'll keep tracking exactly how this power struggle continues evolving in the months ahead, so stick around. Because based on everything we just walked through, this particular succession war is very far from finished.